want relationships to work. That doesn't mean to say that I expect everybody to like me, or everything to go smoothly, or everything to happen just the way I want. But I do want to be able to relate to people, no matter how challenging, no matter how difficult, in inverted commas, I might label them as being, in a way that is respectful, mutually respectful, infused with understanding and compassion. And the main tool I draw on for that is this wonderful process called non-violent communication. It is a universal process, not just a form of words, not just a set of techniques, but a way of being. What happens to us when we come across somebody that we think is difficult? From my experience, and from experience of working with loads of people over the years, what tends to happen is that we put a label on them. You know, all sorts of things go through our heads which are not substantiated, they are our own interpretation. And then what happens is that we react to our interpretation. It's not the behavior or the words that trigger an emotional reaction in us, it's the way we see it. Another thing that happens to us is that we experience people's behavior as somehow diminishing us. We say, I'm feeling disrespected, or I'm feeling ignored, or I'm feeling rejected or frustrated. When we are using words like that, we are putting ourselves in the role of victim. We are saying, things are being done to me, and I don't like it. We're giving away responsibility for how we feel to the other person, and we are implying, maybe without realizing it, that we think we're feeling something, but in fact we are experiencing something as being done to us. Because if I say, you are disrespecting, I feel you are disrespecting me, I then have to go a stage further and say, when I experience you as not showing me respect, what am I feeling? There's a difference, and it comes down to very, very careful awareness of how we're using our words. So when I'm talking about feelings, I'm talking about real feelings, emotions, not these, what somebody is doing to me type things that we call feelings, but are not really feelings. When we get triggered by something that somebody has said, this so-called difficult person, and I invite you to think back to the person you've identified, or the people you've identified as being difficult, what happens is that we do have an emotional reaction. And then we start getting heated. When we're down here in the green zone, we're okay. We have choices. We can access our resources. We're aware of what we're feeling, but we can deal with it. It's not going to take us over. When we're getting a little bit more emotionally intense and aroused, we go into this orange zone. And when we're in that zone, our thinking begins to get dichotomized. We begin to think in binary terms. You're right, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm good, you're bad. This is, this isn't. We separate our thinking. We begin to talk in black and white terms. We don't see all these 50 shades of grey in between. So we lose our capacity to be really flexible and understanding of people. If we get really triggered, if all these judgments, negative interpretations, criticisms of the person that we've been making have sent our blood boiling up to the top of this thermometer, then our brains have been hijacked. Don't know whether you follow Dan Siegel, the neuroscientist, neurophysiologist. Okay. He writes a lot about the neuroscience of people and emotions and stuff. And he has a neat little metaphor for thinking about how our brains get hijacked. If you imagine this is your brainstem, the thinking, the feeling, and the really primitive survival bits. In evolutionary terms, the survival ones came first, and then the more emotional ones, and then the thinking ones, the thinking part of the brain, which separates us from animals. We've got a big cortex. When there is a link between the feelings and our thought processes, we can access our internal resources. We can be in control. When we literally flip our lid and lose that connection, and we've gone right up into the red zone, then we're lacking choice. We don't have access to our resources. So what we're talking about with nonviolent communication is keeping ourselves in the resourceful state where we can continue to act on our values with respect and consideration and understanding for ourselves and for other people. The more we stay in the zone, in the mode of criticizing these people out there that we call difficult, the more we grumble about them, the more we moan, the more we criticize, the less likely we are to be connected with what's really important to us. Because it's not my fault, I am a victim. If we can then take back our power and say, what is going on in me? Why am I feeling like this? Then we can access our resources and make choices about what to say and do next. Autonomy, fun, warmth, beauty, closeness, support, love, appreciation, empathy, protection from harm, rest, meaning, acceptance, authenticity. Is there anything there that you can say, I never want any of this in my life, ever? The fact that we all agree that they're good things suggests to me that they are, you can accept that they are universal good. Okay. Next question is, what does it mean for you to have these things in your life? What would life be without it? I see these things as what makes life good for me. Without them, I think I would be malnourished. I wouldn't be happy, I wouldn't thrive. In the context of nonviolent communication, concepts like that are what we describe as our fundamental, universal human needs. They are the things that give us the motivation to do what we do. Whatever we do, we're trying to meet needs. The way we try to meet needs might be successful, might be not successful. Some people try to meet their needs in ways that are abhorrent to us. And the same principle applies. They're still trying to meet needs, no matter how distorted the connection between the need and the strategy for meeting the need has become. Moment by moment, what need am I trying to meet? If I am feeling upset or hurt, what need of mine is not being met? What am I longing for? If I'm judging somebody, like, I don't know, let's say, he's just not being considerate, that suggests I'm just longing for some understanding, some consideration, some recognition, something that tells me I matter. So instead of saying, blaming, criticizing, judging the other person, if I can take it back, as you suggested, inside myself and say, what am I needing right now? I reclaim my power and I put myself in a position where I have more choices. When I teach this concept on a workshop, people often lapse into a form of words such as, I need you to do something. And so I unpick that and say, okay, if that person did what you're asking, what need of yours would it meet? And when we're angry, we have a thinking process which says, she shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. So we're implying a judgment in our anger. I don't think this is easy. It seems it on the surface, but because we so easily get triggered, then we'd have to do a lot of inner work in order to keep control of ourselves. And the more practice we do, the easier it becomes. I said very quickly at the beginning that at the heart of nonviolent communication is a four-step process, the first of which is observation. What are we noticing? So I like the fact you could describe it in behavioural terms. We habitually use that form of words. You made me feel this, you made me feel that. And I just want to challenge that gently and unpick it a little bit. Because the way I see it is that, yes, 99.9% of people might react in the same way to the same behaviour, possibly. And you might say, okay, there is a link, there's a causal link between the behaviour and the reaction. And still, I want to emphasise the point, we do have a choice. So if we allow ourselves habitually to say, that made me feel something, we are putting ourselves again in the victim role. We're giving away our power and we're saying, I am at the mercy of what other people are doing and saying. I want to reclaim my power and say, when that happens, I'm very likely to have an emotional reaction. I see other people having an emotional reaction. And I am aware that I don't have to have that emotional reaction. I can see things differently. It becomes a practice. It's something that I think mindfulness meditation helps us with. I don't know whether any of you practice mindfulness. But the more we can be aware of our habitual reactions, the more we can step back, take control of ourselves, and deal with this strong emotion in the other person and the emotion that's arising in ourselves. It's the thinking process, the labels, the judgments, the criticisms, the interpretations we put on the other person, the lens through which we are seeing the other person's behaviour, that send us shooting up here. If we can step back and say, what is that person feeling and needing? What needs are they trying to meet? What's going on for them? Then we are putting ourselves in a more respectful, compassionate, and understanding position. This is where we get into empathy. It might be silent empathy. But if we can step aside and say, this person is fearful, angry, upset, because some needs of theirs are not being met, I am not going to take this as a judgment of me and my capacity. I am not going to let myself be demolished by this. I'm going to say, okay, the way they're talking doesn't meet my needs for respect. So be it. I will try and understand where they are coming from. And by going through that internal process, you can then say, step forward and say, okay, what would you like me to do now? So we're not reacting to the heightened emotion which comes from unmet needs of the person who is talking the way you don't like. We're doing silent empathy for ourselves, empathy for the other person, and then thinking, okay, in this moment, all I'm going to do is say, let's work out what to do next. So that you don't get into a conflict. And going through the internal process enables us to put it to rest. It's not just ignoring our reaction and the other person's reaction, It's empathising with ourselves and with the other person and then deciding what to do next. If we start from the position of wanting to change somebody, I believe we are going down a road that won't get us what we want. If it does get us what we want, we'll get it for the wrong reasons. We will either get people to submit, say, oh, all right then, or rebel, you trigger resistance, however small or subtle. I mean, all these things happen on a scale of intensity. So we're talking about people who've been quite civilized, but just holding strongly to their own views in this case. So if you can let go, for the moment, of wanting to persuade somebody, get in touch with what needs of yours are in play in this situation. What lies behind your desire to persuade them to do something? It might be a very strong belief you have. It might be something you want some recognition or acceptance or collaboration or whatever. And then say, how can I reach out to this person who is coming from a very different position from mine? What needs are they holding on to? What needs have they got in this moment which are keeping them in this strongly held position? And then if you can find the words that say, I want to understand you, then the other person might begin to melt a little bit.